Good evening y bienvenidos to Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices. I'm Araceli Gomez Saldana, host and reporter with WBEZ. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. On the show tonight, how much does race and ethnicity matter when it comes to who you are voting for? A new study shares some insight into that. Activist and icon Dolores Huerta talks about her legacy fighting injustice and why, at age 92, she's still in the fight today. And meet the artist behind the brim of a Mexican-inspired Chicago Bulls hat.
Magic is about transformation, and life is about transformation.
And the physician-magician Ricardo Rosencrantz draws upon his Mexican roots. On his day job, he's a doctor and a magician at night. All of that coming up, but first, our story tonight. Common concerns Black and Latino voters share this election season. That's right after this.
Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, is made possible in part by the support of these donors.
A new study conducted by Northwestern University's Center for the Study of Diversity and Democracy is shedding light on the coveted Black and Latino vote. In what's become a highly contested mayoral race, more than ever, candidates are focusing on these two groups to win the keys to City Hall. But what issues are Black and Latino voters focused on? Here to shed light on some of the key issues and Latino voter turnout are Ana Solano, a community organizer for Únete La Villita, Jose Munoz, Executive Director of La Casa Norte, and Jaime Dominguez, Political Science Professor at Northwestern University. The study shows data that some might find surprising. Chicago has certainly had its fair share of racial divide, but according to the study, Black and Latino voters have found common ground when it comes to key issues in the election. Jose, we'll start with you. Was anything surprising?
I'm actually not surprised at all. I mean, I think the data is catching up to what we already knew, is that Black and Latino voters care about the same things. They have families, they care about the violence in the city, they care about housing, they care about their education and their kids, and the things that really impact local politics.
That's true. And what about you, Ana? Was it surprising for you?
It wasn't really surprising. I think that, like Jose says, there's a lot of overlap. And I also think that it doesn't really matter how we look like. I'm very excited to look beyond identity politics and look at the issues that impact both of our communities.
And the study also found that unlike past elections, voters aren't necessarily voting for the candidate that aligns with their ethnicity or their race. So, for example, Latinos aren't necessarily voting for Chuy Garcia. Black voters aren't aligning themselves to Lori Lightfoot or any of the other 6 candidates. Jaime, what does this say about the groups and what they're looking for? Are you muted?
I'm sorry. I think it just shows that despite public perception that these two groups are not a monolith, in fact, they're a very diverse, heterogeneous mosaic whose policy preferences are reflected. You know, this idea that it's a Latino issue or it's an African-American issue, it's clear that these voters are just like any other voters. They care about, number one, crime. Secondly, they care about inflation and cost of living. Third, they care about wages and jobs. Fourth, they care about affordable housing. And fifth was police reform and accountability in that order.
And Jaime, and it's not, you know, we were going to talk some of those top concerns, but when thinking about the candidates and the voters, is not having a consensus candidate a good thing or a bad thing, especially when we're talking about representation in Chicago?
Well, I think for this, this person is going to represent the entire city of Chicago, which is essentially a tripart Black, white, and Latino. So they have to represent the interests of all those groups. So the person who can speak to those issues and be nuanced about it in the ways in which perhaps certain issues disproportionately affect populations, then I think that's going to, you know, their issues are going to resonate. But I just to what my peers here on the panel were saying, I think also the idea of the Black Latino friction is also, I think, a narrative that is, I think, kind of the media has not gotten it right, because even on the issue of like with migrants coming to Chicago, particularly in the African American community, we found in fact that there wasn't any resistance or any kind of negative reaction to it. In fact, it was more about if the city can accommodate those migrants, and the city can also provide for that community. So it wasn't like a rejection of Lori Lightfoot's policy on immigration.
Jose, we were talking about this idea that the study shows, what the findings are, they might be surprising, but maybe you weren't so surprised and others weren't surprised either. What do you think about not having a consensus candidate moving forward?
Yeah, I think it's great for our communities to have different candidates that they can look to and really take a deep dive into the policies and the issues that they care about. Because again, at the end of the day, for our candidate, for our community, what they really care about are the issues. And so to have an opportunity to look at candidates, look at their platforms, and learn about the issues that they care about, that's probably paramount. And so it's great to have different candidates and more choices.
Okay, and let's talk about some of those top issues that we've mentioned. Ana, this big focus on public safety as a major concern for communities. What do you think the candidates have to do to get the Latino vote in this situation?
I think they really have to address public safety. Unfortunately, there's a lot of violence in our communities, and what we've seen so far are politicians and other community leaders advocating for more police presence, but nothing has really changed. I would advocate for us to touch up on the root issues and invest in people and long-term solutions.
Okay, so we've heard a lot about that also with the candidates. And Jose, when it comes to affordable housing, big concern for both groups. What should the candidates take into account when they're talking about affordable housing and the election coming up?
Well, I mean, housing is a big deal for all our communities. Rents are going up, taxes are going up. It's getting more and more difficult for folks to afford to live in Chicago. We've seen an exodus of families that are leaving the city, so we need to invite more of our families to come back to Chicago. We also want to make sure that we're keeping the folks that are going. For the Latino population in particular, the Latino population is growing. I mean, we're growing dramatically. We're already a third of the city, and almost half of all the Chicago public schools students are Latino. And so it's important for a mayor to have that in mind when they're thinking about their policies and how decisions that they're going to be making in the future.
I agree. And for the final question I have for all three of you, how crucial is this election for the Latino voter, right? So what are the results going to mean? Jose, can we start with you?
Sure. I mean, this is a critical election. All elections are important, but this time around, we're coming off the pandemic. We're coming off a period of time where families were impacted with the economy, the pandemic, their health. Latinos lost about 7 years of life after the pandemic, and so it's going to be very important that we get an elected official in office that cares about the entire city of Chicago and those recovery efforts.
Yeah, Ana, what about you? When it comes to how important this election is for Latinos.
I second what Jose said. I'm also very excited to hopefully have a candidate that invests in people long term.
Yeah, definitely. And Jaime, we'll end it with you. What do you think about how important this is for Latinos?
It's important for Latinos, but it's important, I think, more just for the city as a whole. One thing, though, I think that's very important in this election for Latinos is Latinos have to turn out. That's one of the things that we saw in the poll that was a bit concerning. The fact that of those that we polled who were 100% sure that they were going to vote, Latinos had the highest share of that. So that just tells me that that's not to say that they're not politically engaged, because they are. But I think that if the candidates going forward want to compete for the Latino vote, they have to engage the Latino vote, and they have to do it way early, because voting, as we all know, is behavioral. And so I think Latinos just have to do a better job. We as a community have to do a better job of making sure that we engage this community, and not just around election time, 2 weeks before election, all of a sudden the Latino vote is important.
Yes, please go out and vote, right? Our thanks to Jaime Dominguez, Ana Solano, and Jose Munoz. Up next, Joanna Hernandez talks with labor leader and lifelong activist Dolores Huerta in a conversation recorded earlier this week.
It's a simple sentiment, but the phrase "Si se puede" or "Yes we can" has empowered demands for justice around the world. Ever since the United Farm Workers of America adopted it as its motto in 1972. The woman behind those words is Dolores Huerta. She's one of the most influential labor activists in America and a leader of the Chicano civil rights movement. It is an honor to have Dolores Huerta here with us today. Thank you for joining us today.
No, thank you for having me.
I have to ask you, what is your favorite thing to eat when you're here in Chicago, or your favorite neighborhood?
Oh my goodness, there is so much great food in Chicago. It's hard to choose, but I love Greek food. I love Mediterranean food. I love also Hindu food.
Do you like deep dish pizza?
Oh, well, I have to tell you, the first time I ever ate pizza was in Chicago.
Wow, really?
Yes,
What an honor that you ate pizza here in Chicago.
Right.
Now, I want to start off, Dolores, you have been through so much in your life. At this point in your life, what does the slogan "Si se puede" mean to you?
Well, it means activism. It means that people can have the power to change things in their lives, change things politically. And it means that every person should feel their own power and know that they can make a difference.
And that's very important to you, for people to feel their own power. How come?
Well, because there's so many things that we need to make better in our society, especially now that our democracy is at risk. And so it's so important for people to know that it's important for them to vote, to get involved and get engaged civically, and to make sure that they know what's happening on around them, to be informed, what laws are being what laws are being considered at the state level and at the national level, and that they need to contact their representatives, their congressmen, their commissioners, all the people around them that govern us. It's important that we have a voice.
It's very true. Now, you fought against police brutality your whole life, and you yourself beaten by police in 1988. Do you believe the murder of George Floyd and other movements since then have sparked something different in our nation?
Oh, absolutely. We know that this has been going on for a long time. And it was kind of like, you might say, undercover. People didn't know what was going on. But the murder of George Floyd really brought this to the attention of the whole world, as we know.
How is it for you to see the youth speaking out and organizing? It seems like there's a new movement.
Yes, but we still have a lot of our youth that need to vote. Unfortunately, I think we have a lot of our young people that they love to protest and they love to march. They don't realize that voting is the only way that we can change things. And I know that right now you have elections going on here in Chicago. And so we want to say to all the young people out there, please get out there and vote. It's so important.
Would you say that's the first step, voting?
Yes, voting is the first step. And then, of course, keeping in touch with the people that you elect is the second step. You know, making sure that we do that advocacy so that we can hold the people accountable.
And many people know you as a labor organizer, but you've been part of many movements, the women's rights movements, racial injustice to LGBTQ rights. How come?
Well, because everybody needs to be respected, you know, regardless of who they are. And I know we have a lot of Latinos listening to your program and watching your program. And I always like to use the words of Benito Juarez that said, el respeto al derecho ajeno es la paz. Respecting other people's rights is peace, you know. However you feel about women's rights, reproductive rights, however you feel about gay rights, you know, that we have to respect other people for who they are.
And talking about that, what advice do you give to someone who wants to speak out about something, injustice in their community, but are afraid to do so? What do you tell them? Well,
we can't be afraid. We have so many challenges right now in our society that everybody has got to be engaged, involved, and yes, we have to use our voices. We cannot afford to be afraid. There's so many things that we need to make better, and the only way that they can be made better is by our involvement and our engagement.
And you've made so many sacrifices in your life's work. Is there anything throughout your journey that you wish was different, that you could have changed?
Well, I think I've been very, very blessed to be able to make a change in working for different laws that we've passed, like the amnesty law. You know, in California, we just passed a law that all undocumented people can have health care in the state of California. And those are the kind of laws that we can pass throughout the whole United States of America, and to make a better education for everybody in our states. You know, we can do that.
That's amazing. You're 92 years old and you're still at it. Mm-hmm. What drives you?
Well, I'm making things up, making a better life for everyone, and doing that through the civic engagement, through voting, electing progressive people like Chuy Garcia. You know, he's running here for mayor of Chicago, electing good people that are going to represent us.
Are your children proud of you, your adult children?
Yes, they are. In spite of the fact that often I had to leave them, you know, when I was doing my in civil rights work. But all of my kids have grown out to be really, really good people, and they are also very engaged.
Can you share a memory that stays with you, a memory that you've had throughout your life that you keep close to your heart?
Well, I have a lot of great memories, and one of them is with President Obama here when he gave me the Medal of Freedom, and that was in the White House. But I know that he was a state senator here first in Illinois before he became the President of the United States of America.
When you first started, did you ever think that this was going to be your life?
Well, I wanted it to be my life. Once that I found out that if you organized people and you could do this in a nonviolent way without any violence, and that you could actually make changes, I wanted to dedicate my life to do this, and this is what I've been doing with the United Farm Workers, with the Dolores Huerta Foundation, which is my organization right now. And if people want to know more about what we do, they can go to doloreshuerta.org and find out all of the great work that we're doing on education, on civic engagement, on health. We've vaccinated thousands of people against so that they won't get COVID, and we're doing food banks and clinics, you know, so that people will be safe.
How do you want people to remember you?
I hope they remember me as an organizer and as someone that's getting out there and saying to people, you've got to get involved, you've got to get engaged, you've got to vote. That is the number one thing. If we want to keep our democracy, if we want to make changes, it starts with voting.
Do you, when you're out and about, do you see that some people are nervous to vote because of certain circumstances? Is that one of the things that you tell them, you have to vote?
Well, I think people don't vote because they don't think it's important. They don't realize that the people that we elect are the people that are going to make laws that we have to live by, laws that are going to govern our lives and our families. And once they understand that, then they'll get out there and vote.
Are you proud of all the work you've done?
Oh, I'm very proud, and I feel very blessed that I was able to be in that space to make things happen.
If you could go back, what year would you go back to?
Well, I think this is the most important year right now because we have so many challenges and we have so many things that before were kind of like hidden, you might say, but now they're out in the open and we are seeing them. And we know that these are the things that we have to really work on, like global warming, right? Like getting rid of racism, getting rid of homophobia, getting rid of misogyny, maybe making sure that we get women's reproductive rights and equal rights amendment for women passed in the U.S. Congress. So
yes.
This is an exciting time. I don't think I would ask for any other time.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It was such an honor.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
Our thanks to Dolores Huerta. Now, Araceli, back to you.
By day, Dr. Ricardo Rosencrantz cares for premature infants and teaches medicine at Northwestern University. But by night, the good doctor transforms into physician-magician. In his new show at the Rhapsody Theater, Rosencrantz weaves stories of his career into elegant delusions and feats of mentalism. Producer Erica Gunderson conjures up this story.
Magicians hear the word impossible, and that's where we start.
An Aries?
In medicine, every illness,
yes,
big or small,
well done, Balsamo,
carries a risk that you won't be able to make it. And sometimes impossible to heal might be something that either you hear or sits there and everything. So the medical profession is about impossibility.
You're telling us that you want to go to
that is correct.
Italy.
To neonatologist and magician Ricardo Rosencrantz, belief is the golden thread that connects two of his life's greatest pursuits.
I think the most magical thing about belief in medicine is belief that the person that's there is going to take science and apply it as best as they can for you.
The Physician Magician, How to Solve the Rubik's Cube, one-page pamphlet, copyrighted before the pandemic.
Seeing magicians do impossible things give people hope.
Nothing else.
And hope and empowerment help us move forward.
Magic entered my life.
The medicine came before the magic for the physician-magician. It wasn't until Rosencrantz was in his 30s that he began his pursuit of prestidigitation in his native Mexico.
Brand new deck. Open it.
His interest deepened when he moved to Chicago to complete his pediatric residency and met legendary magician, historian, and philosopher Eugene Burger.
I learned from Eugene that magic was just so much more than tricks, that there was this meaning and that the meaning was powerful. Some people in their 30s and 40s, they get cars and see psychiatrists. I saw Eugene.
Rosencrantz incorporated magic into his classes as a professor at Northwestern University and moonlighted performing his magic show, The Rosencrantz Mysteries. In 2022, when a historic Rogers Park Theater was put up for sale, Rosencrantz seized the chance to transform it into a showcase for magic and cabaret performance.
I'm a big believer that the art has to come to the neighborhoods, that we shouldn't all have to go to the Loop to get culture.
I just want you to cut.
In his show at the Rhapsody Theater, Rosencrantz pulls inspiration from his own life to create an enchanting new spectacle.
With COVID being the kind of very difficult time for everybody that it was, I feel that sometimes people come to theater to forget, but sometimes people come to theater to remember and process. And so the theme for this particular show is loss.
Thank you so
Magic is about transformation, and life is about transformation. And that is what I've put in this show.
It also gives Rosencrantz the opportunity to offer another nod to his Mexican upbringing, Sunday performances of his show in Spanish.
The physician magician will be called El Médico Mago.
You know, my mother...
I'm Mexican. I grew up in Mexico. I fell in love with medicine in Mexico. I fell in love with magic in Mexico. And I need to do a show in Spanish that celebrates that and gives people an authentic performance in their first language, my first language.
It is an image. It's signed by you.
In watching all these wonderful, beautiful, impossible things that happen, and in hearing stories that are about life and the ups and downs of life and are not necessarily prescriptive, though I'm a doctor, so I'm used to writing a prescription at the end, that when they walk out, they are energized and empowered for their own life. That, for me, is really what I want.
For Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, this is Erica Gunderson.
Rosencrantz show, Physician Magician, is at the Rhapsody Theater through April 2nd, including several shows presented in Spanish. You'll find more on that on our website. And for the 5th running year, the Chicago Bulls rolled out their Artist Hat series this month. The 6 limited edition hats, which feature local artists, spins on the team's iconic logo and are given away to fans at selected games. Among the hats was a Mexican-themed design created by photographer, graphic artist, and lifetime Bulls fan Abel Archiniega. And we meet up with Archiniega to find out what was going on in his head when he drew up Los Toros.
I grew up in the 80s. I was born in 75. In the early 80s, it was Beat Street, Breakin', Wild Style, the 3 movies that I think shaped who I was going to be in my life. So I think it's been in me since I was a kid. The Bulls in the 90s, if you're a Chicagoan, you know what it was if you were lucky enough to be around. I was lucky enough to see Michael Jordan play 2 games as a kid. And both games, I remember him hitting that game-winning shot. And it was just obviously incredible. Every year, the Bulls have what's called the Artist Hat Series. You pretty much submit your art and hope they call you back. And I got the call from the Bulls directly, actually, that they really liked the piece. I was like, I've loved the Bulls forever. So to have my little grain of sand in the history of the Bulls is amazing. Chicago is a beautiful city. There's so much Mexican culture here. Anywhere you go, there's influence of Mexico, the food, the art, the culture, the people. Los Toros, the Bulls, have been big in Hispanic community, especially after the 90s when Jordan and Rodman, were running the show. The Chicago Bull logo, the actual head, is one of my favorite logos. It's just so clean, and I'm not being biased because I'm from Chicago, but it really is a beautiful logo. So I didn't want to change too much of the logo. I just want to kind of incorporate some of the illustrations that I do, which are Mayan and Aztec, and just kind of adding some elements to it just to kind of spice it up a bit. I was at the game. It was something out of this world. I think I was more happy for the kids. It was really nice to see kids rocking the hats. Just the beauty of seeing all races wearing a Aztec Mayan-driven hat was something that I will always remember. To see it come to life and out in the world is super cool.
Now for some bad news, unless you were among the lucky 5,000 to snag a Los Toros hat at the February 16th game, or bought one of the limited edition sets of all 6 hats, you're out of luck. They are sold out. And that's our show for this weekend. Don't forget, you can catch me hosting Weekend Edition Saturday and Sunday, as well as my reporting during the week on 91.5 FM and WBEZ.org. And now, from all of us here at Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, I'm Araceli Gomez Aldana. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. Stay healthy, stay safe. Buenas noches.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud to be a multilingual law firm that provides translators for a variety of languages.